Buongiorno a tutti ragazzi, Luca here, professor of history and enthusiast of Italian culture, and today, in front of the beautiful American Embassy of Rome, we talk about 5 aspects that, in my opinion, Italians get quite wrong about the United States of America. Now, being an Italian... Being an Italian that did research in the US and that studied the American culture his whole life, I've always noticed that we Italians, there are many aspects about the American culture and identity that we get completely wrong. We think we know Americans because of TV series and Hollywood, but in reality we don't. Now, of course, this is a generalization, not all Italians think the same, but I am sure that there are certain aspects that the general Italian public keeps getting wrong about America, and so I want to dive in 5 of these aspects and discuss them with you guys. But before doing it, I want to apologize for the beginning of the video where my intention was to shoot in front of the American Embassy of Rome, but unfortunately, like the guards or Marines or whatever, they prevented me from doing that. And I was not that close, I was like 150 meters from the main entrance, but they said, no, you can't. When I was younger, I met and I knew a guy who worked, an American who worked in the American Embassy, but now he retired, so I have no contacts. And so I had to shoot from a position that was not very good. You couldn't see the facade very well. But I have some B-roll, and for you to appreciate the beautiful building in the meantime that I'm talking. But now let's dive in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You guys know me well enough to know that I'm obsessed with geography because I think it explains cultural aspects much better and easier than anything else. And our idea, the Italian idea of the American geography, is extremely poor in general. I mean, we are terrible in geography mostly because we don't study it in school very much. And we are especially terrible when it comes to extra-European geography, like the North American one. So our idea of the American territory is based mostly on what arrives in Italy with the movie industry, with TV series and movies that we binge watch every day. And up until recent years, now it has changed a little bit with the advent of the products such as Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul that are set in the desolated lands of New Mexico and places like that. In general, our idea is shaped by movies and TV series that are always constantly set in only 2 places, California and New York. Stop. So, based on these things that we watch, we think that 95% of people in the US live either in a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan and work in Wall Street, or like in a fancy Santa Monica villa made by Frank Gehry and then works in the movie industry. That's it. I'm not joking. Maybe we know a little bit about Texas because in Italy we have a great tradition of Western movies and Western movie industry. So we know a little bit about Texas, but probably we think they still ride a horse instead of a car. And maybe someone really does it. But in general, that's it. Stop. Our idea is like a gigantic hole that divides the 2 coasts. The East Coast and the West Coast, but nothing in the middle. We have no idea of what's inside the North American continent. And just to let you understand the situation with a practical example, I have a lot of students that ask me some advice for their exchange year in the US. And recently a girl came to me and she was like, Professor, I have to spend a year in the US. I have these 3 possibilities with this agency, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and North Dakota. Which one, in your opinion, has the best ocean view, the best beaches? And I was like, none of them. 0. you will just find a lot of cows, a lot of crops, a lot of tornadoes, and a lot of weapons. Stop. And an aspect that is very much connected with geography is something that I'm really passionate about, and this is urban planning. A tricky one to explain, something that maybe would deserve an entire video about, dedicated to the differences between Italian and American cities. So don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments if you would like this kind of videos. But so far we stick with the basics, and there is a lot to say. Not only do Italians think that 95% of Americans live in the American big cities such as Los Angeles, New York or Chicago, but also their idea of a typical urban, social and economical layout of an American city is completely wrong. Basically, the Italian idea of American cities, also influenced a lot by the fact that most of movies and TV series are set in New York, is that American cities, apart from the skyscrapers, have a very similar layout compared to European and Italian ones, but they're not. So there is this misconception that, for example, Americans who live in the cities, in what we perceive as the city center of American cities, are the most affluent, and they're not, because as American people know, what in European cities is the city center, so the part of the city which is mostly historical and where most of the wealthy people live, is the opposite in the US, because in the US the geographical center of the city is normally downtown, a place that is made mostly of offices, and immediately around the downtown you have the neighborhoods that are in the center of the city, but that most of the times are inhabited by, unfortunately, poor people, lower classes, normally minorities, and this is the complete opposite an Italian city works. For the same reason, our idea of a suburb in Italy is that a suburb is a place far from the city center where in Italy the lower classes live. In America, as you all know, is the complete opposite. Suburb has normally a positive meaning because it's a place where middle and higher classes live, far from the city center. It's the complete opposite. The layout is inverted. And the reason why we don't understand this is also, again, because of the movie industry, because in Italy we dub everything from English. So when we translate the term downtown in Italian, it becomes a city center, so we think that downtown is a nice place, but all Americans know that normally downtown is not a nice place, such as downtown Los Angeles or downtown Detroit or downtown many other cities, and also the neighborhoods in these places such as, again, Detroit is an example, or Compton and south central of Los Angeles or south side of Chicago. They are very close to the city center, but they're not in general places for affluent people. On the opposite, when we translate in Italian the term suburb, we translate it in a way that we think suburb is something peripheric in a negative way. We think suburb is something, a bad place to live, because normally in Italy, in big cities, suburbs, again, are the places where poor people live. And this again creates a lot of misconception. I remember when I was watching with a friend of mine the interview of LeBron James, probably for his MVP, I don't remember, where he said, "I am from inner city, Akron, Ohio." Sorry for the pronunciation. "So I'm not even supposed to be here." And in Italian would translate, "I am from the city center of Akron, Ohio."
so Akron, Ohio, so people thought in Italy, people thought that it was rich. But in inner city Akron, Ohio, there are people who are not rich by any means. So this is something that again created a lot of problems and misunderstandings, and that Italians keep getting completely wrong. So even when they have to book vacations in America, they always make a lot of mistakes because they have no idea of the way an American city works. Also because New York, which is the city Italians know the better, is, as you know, an exception to this normal American city layout, because in the so-called city center, downtown and midtown Manhattan, there are a lot of affluent people. A social aspect connected to the one of the structure of the cities is probably my favorite thing of all, which is demography. And even when it comes to this field, demographics, the Italian idea of how socially and ethnically the American society is structured is extremely outdated, to say the least. Once again, the main blame is to give to Hollywood, because until few years ago, now even in this field things are changing a bit, but until few years ago, all the movies and TV series that arrived in Italy, the characters, they exclusively had English names and last names. So this fueled our idea that basically all white Americans are of British descent. But they're not, of course. In fact, it is widely known that most of white Americans are either of German or Irish origin, and then there are the Scandinavians, Italians, Polish, and so on and so on. And then we are aware of the presence of the African Americans because of sports, and because they are many times they were portrayed in movies and TV series, but that's it. For us, America finishes like that when it comes to the demographics. We basically completely missed what happened in the last 25-30 years, especially when it comes to the great arrival of people from Mexico and even more from other Latin American countries that completely reshaped communities in many American states and cities. We have no idea, for example, of the fact that there are states of the Union, such as California or Arizona or Florida, in which basically in certain areas Spanish is de facto the first language. We have no idea. And even, for example, when it comes to the Asian people, we don't know that, for example, if you go to San Francisco or the northwest of the United States, basically Asian are the majority of people. We are absolutely not aware of this. And it's funny, for example, recently I was watching a movie, American war movie with a couple of friends, and we're like, but why all the Marines and militaries of the American army, why do they all have Spanish last names? Because of course they don't know that the American army, American navy basically is similar to the Mexican army, because most of the people recruited are of Spanish, of Mexican or Latin American descent in general, but we have absolutely no idea of what's going on. And that's it for today, guys. Cliffhanger Finale, like in the TV series of the 90s that I grew up with. Stay tuned for the second part of the video about the Italian perception of the United States. Ciao ciao ragazzi, don't miss the second part.